What are feeding ratios? That's a term that's important for sourdough starters and one that you should take the time to learn and make sure that you understand. They may sound complicated, but they're actually pretty straightforward. Let's take, for example, a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. That's a pretty common ratio that people use. And what that means is with that first character of 1, that's how much sourdough starter we're going to leave in the jar or transfer to a new jar. The second character is the amount of flour that we're going to add to the jar. And the third character is the amount of water we're going to add to the jar. So, for example, with a 1 to 1 to 1, we could leave 25 grams of sourdough starter in the jar and then add 25 grams of flour and then add 25 grams of water. Another example would be if we're going to leave 50 grams of starter in the jar and then add 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. Do the numbers you use matter? No, not really. Just the ratio matters. So, for example, you could leave 1,000 grams of starter in a jar and add 1,000 grams of flour and 1,000 grams of water. The ratio would still be 1 to 1 to 1. Now, there are a variety of ratios that are used. For example, a 1 to 5 to 5 ratio would mean that for every 1 part sourdough starter you leave in the jar or put in a new jar, you would add 5 parts flour and 5 parts water. So to go over those numbers a little bit as an example, for a 1 to 5 to 5, if you left 25 grams of starter in your jar, you would want to add 125 grams of flour and 125 grams of water. That would be a 1 to 5 to 5 ratio. Why do these ratios even matter? Like, what's the point of them? Well, with sourdough baking, the two most important factors are time and temperature. And with feeding ratios, you can really take control of time. With ratios such as 1 to 1 to 1, that's the quickest that you can get a starter to its peak. As you increase the ratio from 1 to 1 to 1, all the way up to 1 to 10 to 10, or whatever it is, the longer your starter will take to peak. So my situation, for example, I like to make my sourdough starter or feed my sourdough starter at night, and I will use a 1 to 5 to 5 ratio when I do that. And with the way that my environment is set up, my ambient temperature in my house, when I use the 1 to 5 to 5 ratio, that is usually peaked for me the next day, mid-morning, when I'm going to start my dough day. Now, that can change over time based off the season. Maybe it's the summertime and I don't have my air conditioning on and my windows are open, it's hot in my house. I might want to use a different ratio. Another example is if I want to start a dough day in the afternoon, I might wake up in the morning and feed my starter with a 1 to 2 to 2 ratio. And in my environment, that would mean that my starter is peaked by the afternoon when I want to start that recipe. So this is a very important thing to understand and to test out in your environment, because when you can control the time for sourdough baking, that is an extremely important tool to have in your belt. Understanding the life cycle for your starter when you're using different ratios, while it can be time consuming at first, that can really save you a ton of time down the road and a bunch of headaches. I have baker friends that use 1 to 1 to 1, 1 to 2 to 2, 1 to 4 to 4, 1 to 5 to 5. It all really depends on what your situation is. And no, you don't have to use the same one every time. You want to use the ratio that works best for your situation and your timing. Your starter is not going to die if at one feeding you use a 1 to 1 to 1, and then the next one you use a 1 to 5 to 5. That's totally okay.